Imagine a world with no electricity, no factories, no mass production, no railroads crossing continents. Every single product is made by hand. Every journey takes weeks, not hours. Most families produce nearly everything they use themselves. Then, in just a few generations, everything changes. Machines replace muscle, steam replaces sweat, cities explode in size. And the modern world as we know it is born. This is the story of the Industrial Revolution, the incredible turning point that transformed America, reshaped our society, and launched the age of technology. Let's rewind the clock. Before the late 1700s, life for most people was rural and predictable. Families worked their farms from sunrise to sunset. The clothes on their backs were made at home, spun and woven by hand. The tools they used were forged by a local blacksmith. Production was slow, limited by human hands and human strength. If you needed fabric, a weaver made it, thread by thread. If you needed a new metal tool, a blacksmith hammered it out. But as the population began to grow, this system started to crack under the pressure. Demand was rising, but production simply couldn't keep up. Something big had to change. And that change started with a new source of power. The first great leap forward came from a simple but revolutionary idea. What if you could turn heat into motion? Early steam engines already existed, but they were clunky and inefficient. Then, inventors, particularly in Britain, began making major improvements. Suddenly, these new steam engines were powerful enough to pump water out of flooded coal mines. Then they were adapted to power machines. And soon, they were running entire factories. For the very first time in history, production was no longer limited by the strength of a person or an animal. Energy became scalable. Coal became king, and steam became the engine of progress. This was the dawn of mechanized industry. With this new power source, one industry exploded first: textiles. The demand for clothing was enormous, and textiles became the perfect testing ground for full mechanization. A wave of new inventions completely changed the game. Spinning machines could produce thread faster than dozens of workers combined. Mechanical looms could weave fabric at a speed that was previously unimaginable. Massive textile mills, filled with these new machines, began to spring up. Production moved out of cozy homes and into loud, bustling factories. This shift created a brand new system: factory labor. Workers no longer set their own pace, the machines did. Time wasn't just passing, time became money. And this new factory system was about to cross the Atlantic and take root in the United States. America didn't just adopt industrial methods, it embraced them aggressively. Water-powered mills began popping up all over New England. Huge textile factories rose along the rivers, and entire manufacturing towns were built from the ground up. But what made the American Industrial Revolution different was the sheer scale of it all. America had vast natural resources just waiting to be used. It had a rapidly expanding transportation network. It had a growing population eager for work, and a uniquely entrepreneurial culture that celebrated risk and innovation. Factories multiplied at an incredible rate. Production surged. America was transforming from a quiet, agricultural society into a roaring industrial powerhouse. And then came the railroads, the invention that put the Industrial Revolution on hyperdrive. Before the railroad, moving goods across the country was slow, expensive, and difficult. But with steel rails stretching across the continent, everything changed. Goods could now move faster and farther than ever before. Factories could ship their products to nationwide markets and receive raw materials from distant sources. This expansion created a ripple effect, fueling entire industries. Steel production boomed to create the rails and locomotives. Coal mining expanded to power the engines. Bridge engineering and locomotive manufacturing became massive sectors in their own right. The U.S. railroad network grew into one of the largest in the world, binding the nation together not just with tracks, but with economic ties. Suddenly, distance was no longer the barrier it once was. This explosion of industry had a magnetic pull on people. Families left their farms and moved to the cities in search of steady jobs. Immigrants arrived from all over the world, dreaming of opportunity. As a result, urban populations exploded. Cities like New York, Boston, Philadelphia, Chicago, and Pittsburgh ballooned into sprawling industrial centers. But this rapid growth came at a heavy price. Housing was overcrowded and often squalid. Sanitation systems couldn't keep up, leading to widespread disease. And inside the factories, working conditions were brutal. A typical workday was 12 to 14 hours long, 6 days a week. Safety rules were practically non-existent, and accidents were common. The Industrial Revolution created incredible wealth, but it also created immense suffering. One of the darkest and most heartbreaking aspects of this era was child labor. In mills, mines, and factories across the country, children as young as 6 or 7 worked alongside adults. They were hired to handle dangerous machines and crawl through tight, hazardous spaces that adults couldn't reach. Why? Because their labor was cheap and their families were desperate for every penny of income. It took a long time for public awareness to grow. Reformers began to speak out, exposing the horrific conditions and demanding new laws to protect children. Eventually, regulations were passed to limit child labor and mandate schooling, but this change took decades of struggle. The march of industrial progress did not begin gently. For many, it began with brutal exploitation. But through it all, the Industrial Revolution was fueled by a relentless culture of invention. It was a time of new tools, new processes, and new machines that changed the world. American inventors played a major role in this creative explosion. The concept of interchangeable parts, for example, made it possible to mass-produce and easily repair complex machines. New machine tools allowed for unprecedented precision, standardizing production. And later in the century, a new wave of breakthroughs arrived. The telegraph, which allowed for instant communication across vast distances. The harnessing of electrical power, advances in industrial chemistry, and the mechanization of agriculture. Innovation stopped being an occasional event and became a continuous cycle. Industry fueled invention, and in turn, invention drove industry forward, creating the foundations of the modern technological world we live in today. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this journey through history fascinating, be sure to like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into the events that shaped our world. Let us know in the comments what part of the Industrial Revolution you find most interesting. See you next time. Have you ever wondered how our world got so fast? Why you can buy a shirt made halfway across the globe, or flip a switch and light up a room? It wasn't always like this. The story of our modern life was forged in fire, steam, and steel during a period that didn't just change history, it reinvented it. This is the story of the Industrial Revolution. Let's rewind to the late 1700s. For thousands of years, life was largely powered by muscle, human and animal. Most people were farmers, and their lives were tied to the land and the seasons. Production was slow, done by hand, one piece at a time. But then, in Great Britain, something incredible happened. Innovators started tinkering with steam power. James Watt didn't invent the steam engine, but he perfected it, making it efficient enough to power machinery. Suddenly, you could build a factory anywhere, not just next to a river. This was the spark. The first industry to be completely transformed was textiles. Before, spinning thread and weaving cloth was a painstaking process done in cottages. With inventions like the spinning jenny and the power loom, textile production exploded. A single machine could do the work of dozens of people. Factories sprung up, first powered by water, then by steam. This new factory system was born. It demanded workers, and people began leaving their farms for a new kind of life in the cities. These weren't just new machines. This was a new way of organizing human labor. The demand for machines and engines created a thirst for iron and coal. Coal mines went deeper, and iron foundries glowed hotter. This created a powerful feedback loop. Better iron meant better machines, which could mine more coal, which could fuel more engines. It was an engine of growth, literally. But all these goods and materials needed to move. This brings us to the next great leap, the transportation revolution. Canals were dug, connecting industrial cities. But the real game-changer was the railroad. Steam locomotives, pulling heavy loads on iron rails, could transport goods faster and cheaper than ever before. The world started to shrink. This first wave of industrialization, centered in Britain, laid the foundation. But by the late 1800s, the revolution went into overdrive. This was the second industrial revolution, and this time, it was global. The star of this new era wasn't steam. It was electricity. Think about it, the ability to send power across wires, instantly. Factories no longer had to cluster around a single giant steam engine. They could be designed for maximum efficiency, with electric motors powering individual machines. Production soared to levels previously unimaginable. And the materials changed too. Steel, much stronger and more versatile than iron, became the building block of the modern world. The Bessemer process made it cheap to produce in massive quantities. Skyscrapers could now reach for the heavens, and bridges could span wider rivers. At the same time, oil joined coal as a critical fuel source. The internal combustion engine was about to change transportation all over again, paving the way for the automobile. This era gave rise to new industrial titans, steel corporations, oil empires, and railroad tycoons. Their names are still legendary: Carnegie, Rockefeller, Vanderbilt. They built massive fortunes and wielded immense corporate power, which in turn sparked fiery debates about monopolies, worker rights, and the role of government in the economy. This is where modern capitalism, with all its complexities, truly took shape. But what was life like for the average person working in these new factories? It was tough. People worked long hours, often 12 to 14 hours a day, 6 days a week, for very low pay. The conditions were often dangerous. Machines had few safety features and accidents were common. Men, women, and even young children toiled in these harsh environments. The stark contrast between the immense wealth of the factory owners and the grueling poverty of the workers couldn't be ignored. Something had to give. And it did. Industrial workers began to realize that individually they were powerless, but together they had a voice. They started organizing. Labor unions were formed to fight for their collective interests. Their demands were simple and clear: shorter hours, safer working conditions, and fair pay. When owners refused to listen, workers used their most powerful tool: the strike. They would walk off the job, shutting down production. Some of these strikes turned violent, leading to clashes with company guards or police. But slowly, painstakingly, they began to win victories. Labor laws were gradually passed, establishing things like an 8-hour workday and workplace safety standards. The American workplace we know today didn't just happen. It was built on the struggle and sacrifice of these early labor movements. The Industrial Revolution didn't just change how people worked. It completely reshaped everyday life. For the first time in history, mass-produced goods became affordable for ordinary people. The cost of clothing plummeted. Better tools became available for farming and crafts. New transportation networks meant a greater variety of food could be shipped to cities, improving diets. A new social class, the middle class, expanded rapidly. These were managers, clerks, engineers, and professionals who had more disposable income and leisure time. This gave birth to consumer culture. People started buying things not just for survival, but for comfort, for status, for fun. And technology began to creep into the home. Electric lighting replaced gas lamps and candles, transforming the night. Modern plumbing brought clean water and sanitation. Later waves would bring a flood of household appliances that saved time and labor. Industry didn't just build factories. It rebuilt our homes and our lives from the ground up. This new industrial might also reshape the global balance of power. Nations with strong industrial bases gained a massive advantage. Their factories could produce advanced weapons and support large armies and navies. Their economic strength allowed them to build global empires and expand their influence. Great Britain, the first to industrialize, ruled the waves and a vast colonial empire. But other nations were catching up fast. Germany, and especially the United States, rose as manufacturing giants. A country's industrial output became a direct measure of its national power. Economic strength was now the engine driving geopolitical strength. The foundations of the modern global system, where economic competition and industrial capacity define international relations, were being laid. But this incredible growth came at a steep price, a price we are still paying today. The Industrial Revolution ran on resources and it consumed them at a ferocious pace. Forests were cleared for timber and to make way for cities and farms. Coal smoke from thousands of factories and homes choked the air in industrial cities, creating thick black smog. Rivers and lakes were polluted with industrial waste and human sewage. In the beginning, there was very little environmental awareness. The focus was on progress and profit, and nature was seen as an infinite resource to be exploited. It was only much later that societies began to recognize the devastating ecological cost of this unchecked growth. The environmental consequences of the Industrial Revolution created a set of challenges that we are still grappling with all over the world. So, what is the ultimate legacy of this incredible period? Just look around you. The world you inhabit is a direct product of the Industrial Revolution. The factories that make your phone, the power grid that charges it, the vast transportation networks that brought it to you. The consumer market, where you bought it, and the very city you might be living in, all of it traces its roots back to this transformation. It wasn't just about inventing better tools. It was a fundamental shift in how human beings organize society. Work moved from the field to the factory. Production moved from individual craft to a massive, interconnected system. And the economy shifted from local and agricultural to global and industrial. We are all, in a very real sense, children of the Industrial Revolution. In the end, the Industrial Revolution was so much more than just machines and factories. It was the great turning point of modern civilization. It transformed how we work, how we live, how we travel, and how we interact with each other and the planet. It unleashed unprecedented opportunity and created staggering wealth, but it also brought hardship, inequality, and conflict. It sparked incredible innovation while disrupting age-old ways of life. But one thing is certain, it launched the modern age. And once that engine of change started, there was no going back.